want you to just take a second and imagine that you're holding a magnifying glass.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. And under that glass is a tiny, mossy woodland violet. The botanical name is Viola sylvestris.
Oh, beautiful little plants, yeah.
Exactly. And you are looking so closely that you see every single tiny branching vein on its heart-shaped leaves.
Like really zooming in.
Right. You notice these microscopic beads of moisture clinging to the moss at its base. You see the intricate, cracked glaze of the small ceramic pot holding it all together.
You're noticing absolutely every detail.
Every single one. And the question is, in our incredibly fast-paced, doom-scrolling swipe to the next thing world, what does it actually mean to truly deeply see slowly?
Well, taking the time to observe something so fragile with that level of intense focus, it almost feels like a radical act these days, you know?
It really does.
Yeah, I mean, it forces this complete mental shift away from the constant barrage of just fragmented information we usually consume.
And that question, how we observe the natural world and how technology either hinders or helps that observation, that's the core mission of this deep dive today.
It's a fascinating intersection to explore.
It really is. We have an incredibly rich stack of sources looking at the modern studio of designer and artist Jörg Bernhard Klemmer, located in Buxtehude, Germany.
Buxtehude.
Yeah. And we're going to examine how he fuses traditional hand-thrown ceramics, cutting-edge macro photography, and this is the all-part AI-generated watercolors.
It's quite the combination of mediums.
It is. And from his digital studio, we are tracing the aesthetic and scientific DNA of his work, all the way back to the pioneering botanical expeditions of figures like Maria Sibylla Merian and Alexander von Humboldt.
Because Klemmer's modern endeavor, which he calls his Kusamono project, it creates this stark physical contrast.
How so?
Well, on one hand, you have the visceral, dirty, ancient reality of clay and kilns.
Yeah, you're getting your hands dirty.
Exactly. And then on the other, you have the sterile, high-speed calculation of digital rendering and, well, algorithmic hallucination. He's using the absolute newest technology to chase a very old aesthetic.
Right, so let's start with the physical reality of it. The Kusamono project.
Sure.
If you hear that term and picture a traditional, heavily trimmed, highly manicured bonsai tree sitting rigidly on a display table, just throw that image out.
Yeah, it's not that at all.
Not at all. Kusamono translates roughly to grass thing or weed thing in Japanese.
Which sounds so simple, but it's really not.
Exactly. These are highly poetic, small-scale botanical landscapes. They're these fragile microbiotopes where the plant, the pot, the patina, the glaze, and the passage of time all become this single harmonious entity.
Right. It's not about dominating nature or forcing a tree into some unnatural shape.
No, it's about framing a tiny, quiet, almost overlooked moment of ecology.
And the material craftsmanship required to frame that moment is just intense. I mean, Klemmer doesn't just arrange plants in mass-produced containers.
Right. He makes them himself.
He creates the pots from scratch, treating the vessel as a critical part of the biotope. He uses raku, which is...
That's the really dramatic firing process, right?
Exactly, yeah. It's highly unpredictable. It involves pulling red-hot ceramics right out of the kiln and plunging them into combustible materials.
Oh.
Yeah, to create smoke and thermal shock. He also uses frost-proof stoneware and porcelain, firing them at incredibly high temperatures.
Like how high?
Pushing 1,280 degrees Celsius.
That is absurdly hot.
It is, and he does it to achieve very specific structural integrities and surface textures.
And he also formulates his own glazes to mimic natural weathered surfaces, right?
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
He isn't just dipping these pots in standard commercial colors you'd buy at a store.
No, he's inventing these poetic formulas. I was reading the sources, and the names are amazing. Things like Shadow Lake Blue or Arctic Copper Mist.
They sound like fantasy novel locations.
They really do. But he is chemically engineering these surfaces to look like oxidized stones or aged metal or morning fog. He's literally building the geological foundation that the plant is going to live in.
But then, once that microbiotope is cultivated once the moss has settled into the cracks of that Arctic copper mist glaze and the Viola sylvestris has actually bloomed, that's when he takes this massive digital leap.
Right, the photography phase.
Exactly. He documents these tiny landscapes using highly specialized macro photography techniques. They're called focus bracketing and focus stacking.
Okay, so focus stacking. Because when you photograph something that tiny up close, the depth of field-like, the area that is actually in sharp focus is millimeter thin.
Right, it's incredibly shallow.
Yeah, so if the front edge of a petal is crisp, the back of the petal is just a complete blur. The physics of optics just won't allow a single lens to capture the whole micro-landscape in focus at once.
Exactly, and that's where focus stacking comes in. It completely bypasses that optical limitation.
How does it actually work?
Well, the camera takes dozens, sometimes even hundreds, of individual photographs, and with each shot, the focal plane shifts just a fraction of a millimeter.
So it's just scanning through the plant, basically.
Basically, yeah. And then software analyzes every single pixel across those hundreds of images, extracts only the absolute sharpest parts of each frame, and stitches them all together.
That's wild. So the result is an image with an impossible depth of field.
Totally impossible for the human eye, yeah.
It captures extreme details that we just cannot process simultaneously. The microscopic thermal cracks in the raku stoneware, the way the metallic pigment flows in the glaze, even the tiny translucent hairs on a moss spore.
He is using technology to give us superhuman vision of his own handcrafted objects. But he doesn't stop at the stacked photograph.
Right, this is where it gets controversial for me.
The AI phase.
Yeah. He takes these insanely high-res, hyper-detailed digital images and he feeds them into an AI image generator.
He does.
He prompts the AI to translate these modern, high-definition photos into large-format watercolor plates that look exactly like 19th century botanical illustrations.
Which is a very specific stylistic choice.
It is.
Yep.
And he even goes as far as using AI to generate ambient generative soundscapes, subtle string arrangements, the ambient noise of dripping water, to accompany his video presentations of these works.
He's basically creating a complete multisensory digital archive of a physical, fleeting moment.
Yeah.
The AI is analyzing the topography of a frost-proof porcelain pot and rendering it as a wet-on-wet watercolor technique. It's translating the sharpness of a macro lens into the soft bloom of pigment on textured paper.
Okay, but I really have to push back on this step.
Go for it.
Because AI is constantly criticized for being a fast, thoughtless shortcut, right? Like a way to bypass the hard work of actual painting or drawing.
Sure, that's the common critique.
And we just went over the extreme physical labor of throwing porcelain, formulating custom glazes, firing kilns at 1280 degrees, cultivating a delicate woodland violet, taking hundreds of stacked photos.
It's a massive amount of work, yes.
Right, and then he just hands all that human effort over to an algorithm.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like a massive contradiction. Why outsource the final artistic step to a machine?
Well, that contradiction is actually the core of what makes his work so provocative. Klemmer doesn't view the AI as a replacement for human effort or some shortcut to bypass labor.
Then what is it to him?
He views it as a medium. In his own documentation, he describes the algorithm as being, and this is a quote like glaze, a camera, or a drawing pen.
Just another tool in the workshop.
Exactly. He is intentionally taking the absolute fastest, most frictionless modern technology available, artificial intelligence, and using it to force the viewer into a state of slow, contemplative observation.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, he's translating a hyper-detailed digital reality back into an analog-feeling, poetic watercolor space. It's deliberate friction. He is using algorithmic speed to create human slowness.
Using speed to create slowness. That's a great way to put it.
It's very intentional.
And those AI watercolors he generates, they deliberately mimic a very specific, recognizable aesthetic.
Very recognizable.
That classic botanical illustration look. You know, the plant isolated on a blank off-white page, the neat little elegant script at the bottom, the floating cross-sections of seeds and stamens meticulously arranged around the main stem.
Right. Everyone has seen that style.
Yeah, but when we talk about chasing a historical aesthetic, we really need to look at where that specific visual language actually originated.
We do. And to do that, we have to talk about Carl von Linné.
Right.
When Linné published Species Plantarum in 1753, it wasn't just his binary nomenclature, the two-part Latin naming system, that changed the game.
Because the era was just drowning in new information, right?
Completely overwhelmed. There was a sheer flood of new plants and animals pouring into Europe from global trade and exploration. So to bring order to that chaos, Linné didn't just standardize names, he standardized the visual language of botany itself.
How did he do that?
In his work, Philosophia Botanica, he included what were called Mustertafeln, which translates to pattern plates.
Okay, so these were strict visual templates. They dictated exactly how leaves, roots, stems, and especially sexual organs should be drawn to achieve absolute scientific clarity.
Right, there was no room for artistic interpretation.
Which is wild because before this, botanical art could be highly decorative, sometimes symbolic, often really inconsistent.
Oh, totally. A flower might be drawn just to look pretty.
Yeah. But Linné essentially created a rigid visual syntax. So a botanist in Sweden could look at a drawing and know exactly what a botanist in London was looking at.
And this gave rise to a whole new concept in Germany called Gebrauchskunst, which means applied art or art for use.
Art for use. I like that.
Yeah, botanical illustrations weren't meant to hang in a salon and look pretty. They were scientific instruments.
Right.
They had to be aesthetically beautiful to capture the nuance of the plant, but primarily they had to be scientifically accurate and functional for identification.
And we see this synthesis of art and utility perfectly in the 18th century collaboration between the Nuremberg physician Christoph Jacob True and the artist Georg Dionysius Ehret.
Oh, that's a classic pairing.
Yeah, True was the scientist and the patron providing the specimens, and Ehret was the master artist bringing these plants to life on the page according to these strict scientific principles.
But the physical toll of creating these perfect, isolated scientific images was incredibly demanding. I mean, our sources detail a specific incident with Ehret that is just wild.
Oh, the water fennel story.
Yes,
Yeah.
he was commissioned to draw the water fennel and Nymphaea aquatica for the Royal Society. And to get the details exactly right, he had massive quantities of fresh specimens of this plant brought into his studio to study over several days.
Which sounds fine until you realize what the plant does.
Right. The concentrated essential oils emitted by the decaying water fennel literally made him physically ill.
Wait, like seriously ill?
Oh yeah, he was vomiting and suffering severe headaches just to achieve the level of scientific accuracy required for these plates.
He poisoned himself for the sake of the archive.
Basically, yes.
That's dedication. But, when I look at those classic Linnaean illustrations, the ones Ehret mastered, I don't see a living plant.
What do you see?
I see a mugshot.
A mugshot. Okay, explain that.
Think about how a mugshot functions. Front view, side view, blank background, harsh lighting, absolutely no distractions. If you need to identify someone, it is the perfect visual tool.
Sure, it gets the job done.
But a mugshot tells you absolutely nothing about the person's actual life. You don't know where they live, what they eat, who they interact with, or what climate they prefer. It completely strips a subject of its environment and its context.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the problem with that botanical mugshot is that while it gives you the absolute identity of the plant, it completely erases its ecology.
Exactly.
Nature doesn't exist on a blank white page. Linné's strict rules stripped the plant of its ecosystem.
Which brings us back to Klemmer.
Right. If Linné's system required isolation, Klemmer's modern Kusamono project represents the exact opposite philosophy. Kusamono is fundamentally about the relationship between the specific plant, the specific soil, the specific vessel, and how they all interact over time.
So if Linné's strict rules stripped the plant of its ecosystem, the immediate scientific backlash had to come from someone who actually went into the field to observe the messiness of nature.
And that someone was Maria Sibylla Merian.
Yes, she completely rejected the mugshot.
Merian's story is just remarkable. It's 1699. She is a 52-year-old woman living in Amsterdam, moving in scientific and artistic circles.
Okay.
And she realizes that looking at dead, pinned insect specimens in European curiosity cabinets isn't telling her anything about how these creatures actually live.
Because they're just mugshots.
Exactly. So she boards a ship with her 21-year-old daughter and travels to the Dutch colony of Suriname.
In 1699.
In 1699, deep in the South American jungle, just to see these insects in their natural habitat.
The logistics of a two-woman scientific expedition to the jungle in 1699 are just staggering.
Unbelievable, yeah.
The heat, the humidity, the diseases. I read that specimens rotted so quickly in the jungle heat that she had to draw incredibly fast, observing life cycles in real time.
She had no choice.
And what she produced from that expedition, her groundbreaking 1705 work, Metamorphosis Insectorum Surinamensium, it completely shattered the Linnaean blank page paradigm.
It really did, because instead of drawing a dead caterpillar isolated on a board and a dead butterfly pinned next to it, she illustrated the entire life cycle of the insect.
All on one page.
Yeah, the egg, the larva, the pupa, the adult. And critically, she drew them directly interacting with their specific host plants.
That's the key right there.
Right, you actually see the caterpillar chewing through the leaf of the specific tree it requires to survive. She was illustrating complex ecological webs before the word ecology even existed.
That's brilliant.
It is. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe famously observed that her work moved seamlessly between art and science.
So she reconnected the insect to the plant. She put the context back in.
Exactly.
And then, about a century later, Alexander von Humboldt took that philosophy and expanded from the local branch to the entire planet.
Humboldt is such a massive figure in this. He took Marian's contextual approach and applied it to global geography.
What year are we talking now?
In 1807, he published his essay sur la géographie des plantes, essay on the geography of plants. And with that, he shifted botany away from static classification and into the realm of dynamic global ecology.
And the visual masterpiece of this shift is his Netterschmeld.
Also known as the Tableau physique des hommes.
Right. It is arguably one of the most important infographics in the history of science.
Oh, without a doubt.
It's this massive, highly detailed cross-section of the Chimborazo volcano in Ecuador.
Which Humboldt had famously attempted to summit himself.
Exactly. And when you look at the Natterschmelde, you see a mountain rising from the tropical base all the way to the snow-capped peak.
And he mapped exactly where specific plants grow on those slopes, right?
He did. You see tropical palms and subterranean plants at the bottom, transitioning into cinchona trees, which is the source of quinine in the middle elevations. And then that gives way to hardy alpine shrubs, and finally, tiny lichens right at the snow line.
It's beautiful just as a drawing.
It is, but the true genius is on the sides of the illustration. He surrounded the mountain with these massive data columns.
Oh, right, the environmental data.
Yeah. He correlated the visual flora with precise data. The altitude, the temperature, the humidity, the air pressure, even the blueness of the sky, which he measured by a cyanometer at each specific elevation.
So he was proving visually that a plant's very existence is dictated by complex, interconnected environmental parameters.
Exactly. You cannot understand the plant without understanding the atmosphere around it.
So it's a clear story of expanding context over centuries, right?
Let's trace it.
Linné isolated the plant on a blank page to name and categorize it. Marian reconnected the plant to its local biological web, showing the immediate interactions of life and death.
Right.
Then Humboldt reconnected the plant to the global environment, showing how temperature and altitude dictate survival. And today, we see Jörg Bernhard Klemmer taking the plant, placing it in a handcrafted microbiotope, capturing it with hyper-focused digital lenses, processing it through artificial intelligence, and attempting to reconnect the plant to human emotion, memory, and the passage of time.
That is such a powerful synthesis. Because Klemmer's work, the AI-generated virtual porcelain, the incredibly deep-stacked macro photos, it isn't just a modern technical flex.
No, not all.
He isn't just showing off the capabilities of rendering software. He is on the exact same mission as True, Marian, and Humboldt.
Using the tools of his time.
Exactly. They were all trying, with the absolute best technological tools of their respective eras, to capture the fragile, fleeting beauty of nature and force us to look at it closely.
Do we really need that today?
We do. In an era where you and I are drowning in a flood of fast, disposable digital images, Klemmer's multimedia microbiotopes are an invitation to stop, breathe, and actually look at the microscopic crack in the glaze and the moisture on the leaf.
But you know, that invitation to observe brings up a really fascinating dilemma about how we preserve these observations for the future.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, think about the historical archives we've discussed today. Marian's physical hand-painted books, True and Eric's massive physical folios, they are carefully preserved right now in historical archives like the SLUB State Library in Dresden.
Right, you can physically go there.
You can walk in and look at the physical ink pressed into the physical paper centuries ago.
Yeah.
Klemmer, however, is using AI to dream up what he calls virtual raku surfaces and imaginary porcelain forests.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. He feeds his real-world sketches and stacked macro photos of physical pots into the algorithm, and it generates beautiful, hyper-realistic, but ultimately fictional botanical watercolors.
So the pots in some of these generated plates, they don't actually exist in the physical world.
Exactly. They are just data interpreted as wet pigment.
Wow.
So if Klemmer's digital AI-generated botanical archives are preserved for centuries in some future digital library saved right alongside scans of Marian and Humboldt, how will future historians know which parts of his archive were real, physical objects that he built with clay and fired in a kiln, and which parts were AI-hallucinated dreams?
That is a wild thought. The archive itself becomes a blend of reality and imagination.
And ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, if a beautifully rendered virtual image of a plant and a pot, an image that only exists in the latent space of an AI model, evokes a very real sense of peace, awe, and contemplation in you as you view it.
Does the distinction between physical reality and algorithmic hallucination even matter anymore?
Exactly. If the feeling is real, does the source need to be?